November 9th, 2005, Madonna releases Confessions on a Dance Floor, an album that would come to define the 2000s and reintroduce her as the uncontested queen of pop. But was the massive success of Confessions a blessing or a curse? In this video, we will break down why Confessions on a Dance Floor is widely regarded as one of Madonna's greatest albums ever. To understand how she arrived at this career-defining moment, we first need to revisit the controversial era that came before it. We'll break down the making of the album, its hit singles, and how Madonna secured ABBA's approval against all odds. We will analyze the iconic music videos, unforgettable live performances, and the record-breaking tour that followed. We'll also examine how Confessions shaped the next chapter of Madonna's career, for better and for worse, and why, more than 20 years later, the Queen of Pop is gambling it all on the dance floor once again. And make sure to stick till the end for my opinion on the quality of Madonna's discography after Confessions. This is a deep dive into Confessions on a Dance Floor. Chapter 1: American Life. To best appreciate the genius of Confessions on a Dance Floor, we must understand what preceded it. In the early Y2K, Madonna was already a well-established artist. She was widely known as the Queen of Pop, and with reason. In the 20 years prior, she built a solid music catalog filled with #1 hits and legendary albums. In the 80s, Madonna launched with a bang in a male-dominated industry. Her rise to fame was fueled by her self-titled album, Like a Virgin and Like a Prayer, leaning heavily on sexuality and religion as strong propositions. In the 90s, Madonna developed unique aesthetics on and off stage and explored lyrically as well as visually. She started the decade with erotic themes, exploring the taboos of sexuality, and ended the 90s with a journey towards spirituality that solidified her mainstream appeal. And when the Y2K hit, she shifted gears and eagerly leaned into synth sounds with her album Music, marking one of her most successful era transitions, both visually and sonically. Between Music and Confessions came one of her most criticized work at that point. Despite being sort of rehabilitated in recent years, American Life was not well received at the time. The album had some good singles, but it was not the success Madonna had gotten her audience used to. As I say this, I expect the Madonna fandom to slam dunk me for every criticism I leverage against her. I know the Madonna fandom is savage because when I first started exploring on YouTube years ago, I criticized the speech Madonna gave at some award show, and gosh, Madonna fans don't play. You guys let me have it. So before we continue, I just want to say I'm a huge Madonna fan. I saw her MDNA tour and I collect her music, but that won't stop me from criticizing her where I feel it's merited. I think it's fair to say that at that point in her career, American Life was her least appreciated release. But it did not mean Madonna was in a flop era. Don't get me wrong. Think of the MTV Music Awards stunt with Britney Spears. We covered this in a previous video. It happened during the American Life era. There is plenty to love about her career and music during those years. I like this album, I own it in my collection. Love Profusion is one of my favorite Madonna releases. Like I said, it was not the success that Madonna expected, but I'm curious to know if you like this album. Let me know in the comments below. There's also a cultural and political context surrounding this album. At this point in the timeline, we are in the midst of the Bush administration. Americans rallied behind the flag following the attacks on the World Trade Center of September 11, 2001, but in 2003, Americans were divided over the so-called War on Terror, with images of despair broadcasted every night on television. Madonna was vocal about her opposition to the Bush administration from the start. In this video, we explored how she spoke out against Bush with regards to HIV and LGBTQ+ rights, but Madonna also opposed the war. And American Life is a commentary on the American culture of the time, best exemplified by the first single of the same name. In the video for American Life, the good version, Madonna puts on a fashion show displaying military attires and equipment, and in a since deleted version, she throws a grenade at a Bush impersonator sitting front row. Hollywood is another single that stands out from this album. It embodied the sort of superficial culture of the Y2K and is a criticism of Americans' pursuit of fame and money at all cost, which is ironic given how famous Madonna herself was. I can only theorize, but I think American Life was understandably perceived as a political statement, and therefore divided a mainstream audience following widely popular recent releases like Music and Ray of Life. I say perceived as a political statement because outside the visual marketing for the album and the first single, it's not inherently political as far as lyrics go, but pop music being what it is, the visuals are as important as the music itself. In later years, Madonna revisited the material from this album when she wanted to make political statements, like during her MDNA tour when she portrayed Marine Le Pen with a swastika during a rendition of Nobody Knows Me. In the francophone world in which I exist, this was such a big moment, and I fully agree with Madonna, Marine Le Pen can go fuck herself. Regardless, given the context in which American Life was released, it feels like Madonna wanted to come back with a vengeance for the next album. Our girl wanted to leave scandals behind and go back to the top again. Madonna was eager for a mainstream comeback. Chapter 2. The album. If American Life was culturally anchored in Washington and Los Angeles, then Confessions on a Dance Floor has New York, Tokyo, and London in its DNA. With this release, Madonna is not trying to divide, she is trying to unite. She's inviting us to dance and forget our problems. Prior to making Confessions on a Dance Floor, Madonna worked on a musical with famed French director Luc Besson, as well as a film titled Hello Suckers. For these projects, she worked on disco-inspired tracks with producer Stuart Price, but when these two projects fell through, they decided to focus on making a dance record instead. They primarily recorded this album in Stuart's home studio in London. This provided a cozy environment, which is said to have encouraged artistic exploration. Both Madonna and Stuart Price described the recording sessions as a fun experience. Initially, Madonna solicited the help of Mirwais Ahmadzai, who collaborated with her on Music and American Life, but Price co-produced the bulk of the album. They also sought creative input from Swedish pop duo Bloodshy and Avant, who were most famous for working on Britney Spears' Toxic, as well as Baga and Pierre. With this team, Madonna was set to create a disco Europop dance record. Conceptually, this album was meant to be listened continuously, as if a DJ was mixing each track into the next. Madonna wanted the album to feel like we were at a nightclub. To make this work, they had to carefully plan the pacing of the album so that every song would match the next song's tempo and key. That way, they could easily be mixed into each other. Although the concept is great, I would argue that this idea also caused some pacing issues in portions of the album. For obvious reasons, the album has also been re-released since as a non-continuous project, which was needed for radio plays, DJ sets, and just overall consumer preferences. Both versions are now widely available. I think it's also worth mentioning how Confessions on a Dance Floor is a true solo album. Madonna has no feature on the album. In subsequent releases, she will more heavily lean into collaborations. Hard Candy's first single is a collab with Timbaland and Timberlake. Similarly, MDNA's first single is a collaboration with Nicki Minaj and MIA. So in that sense, Confessions is the last of its kind. Even Confessions 2 is not a truly solo album throughout. It made sense that Madonna did not collaborate with anyone on Confessions because lyrically, many songs are essentially breakup songs, and as we'll see in the next chapter, most of the visuals accompanying this album will emphasize this theme. By the way, if you enjoyed this video, please click the like button, it really helps. Also, if you're early watching this video, like first week after it was released, you can use a new-ish feature on YouTube, it's called hyping, and it kind of hacks the algorithm for small content creators. It helps beyond belief. But no matter what, I'm very thankful that you chose this video over the millions of other videos on YouTube. Thank you so much for being here. I will never forget when Madonna released Hung Up. I was in high school. My parents, who grew up loving Queen, David Bowie, and the progressive rock music of Genesis, rolled their eyes so hard. My dad jokingly said they could not escape Madonna since the 80s. Meanwhile, this was my first real contact with her music, meaning this is the first time I discovered her music on my own and played it on the family speakers. Despite their skepticism of Madonna built from the 80s, my parents ended up giving Madonna the respect she deserved with this album. In a sense, Hung Up was Madonna's Toxic. It's one of those songs songs that appeal to pop skeptics because of its undeniable genius. The overwhelming success of this album in the mainstream might be explained by Stuart Price's secret club testing. Before the album was released, Price used his global DJ gigs as undercover focus groups. In his sets, he would sneak in unreleased instrumentals from their work-in-progress tracks like Hung Up and Sorry to understand how audiences would react. Based on the feedback from the crowd, Madonna and Stuart Price would adjust the song until they got the feedback that they wanted. Hung Up, the first single from the album, is most famous for its use of a sample from ABBA's 1979 hit Gimme Gimme Gimme. But there was only one problem. ABBA is notoriously protective of its catalog. They were known for rarely allowing their work to be sampled. In fact, they only allowed it once prior to Confessions on a Dance Floor. Aware of this, Madonna personally penned a letter to Benny Andersson and Bjorn Ulvaeus to plead for their permission. She sent it to Stockholm with a rough cut of Hung Up, and ABBA eventually granted Madonna the right to use the sample, citing her extensive contribution to pop music as a reason. And thank God, because Hung Up is one of the best first singles Madonna ever released. And the sample really bridged the gap between the older and newer generations. It had so much mainstream appeal, and it sent one strong message: Madonna wants the world to dance, and ABBA approves. With that being said, the album is not entirely disco. Instead, it borrows from the disco era. The sampling of ABBA in Hung Up is one example, but Sorry, the second single, does that too in a different way. It borrows from the disco era, especially from songs like Donna Summer's Last Dance, which tricks the listener by starting as a ballad before going into an upbeat disco banger. Similarly, Sorry opens with soft strings and spoken words before indulging into the upbeat dance DNA of the album. Since the album was released, I have not been able to make my mind up as to whether Hung Up or Sorry was the better song. And in making this video, I tried really hard to form a decisive opinion. When I play Hung Up, I go, wow, this is the best single. Then I play Sorry, and here again I say, wow, this is the best single. I think the ABBA sample on Hung Up makes the track more iconic. Hung Up is the emblematic song from this album, it's undeniable, but I think Madonna's vocals are stronger on Sorry. Her tone is much richer. And as I was writing the script for this video, I found myself revisiting Sorry more than Hung Up. It tickles my brain the right way, but again, it's impossible to choose. I think Sorry also stands out on the album because it has the highest BPM. The album has an average of 121 beats per minute, which is the gold standard for a pop album. Hung Up, Get Together, and Future Lovers all have a BPM of 123, whereas Sorry has a BPM of 136, the highest of all tracks. Now that you know that, the next time you listen to Confessions, you'll notice too. And the intro to Sorry being soft strings tricks you into thinking it's a soft song, so when the beat kicks in at 136 BPM instead of 121, it's impactful. Obviously, Hung Up and Sorry were rightly chosen as the first singles. If I had to rank these singles against other songs on the album, they would definitely be placed in God tier. This is the gold standard, and they can't really be separated, as we'll see in the next chapter when we talk about the music videos. The third single off of Confessions was Get Together. I think this is a solid track, also in line with the DNA of the album. Although it is not as high energy as the previous singles, it's a valid proposition for this album. But it's definitely weaker when compared to Jump, the last single on this album. I think Jump is negatively impacted by its placement on the album. One of my biggest criticism of this album is the pacing. Like, why is Jump nested between Forbidden Love and How High? It makes no sense. Another inconsistency is that Hung Up and Sorry are separated by Get Together on the album when they are conceptually linked to one another as far as music videos go. Another issue I have with this album is the lack of editing. It's about 3 or even 4 songs too long. This is a common criticism I have with Madonna's albums. Confession starts with a bang. The first 5 songs songs are dance tracks with high energy. Hung Up, Get Together, Sorry, Future Lovers, I Love New York, all bangers. Then she slows it down a little with Let It Will Be, but it's not a ballad either. It eventually picks up and it's a whole vibe. But going into Forbidden Love after that feels like hitting a wall, especially because it's followed by Jump. So we sort of lose our way at this point of the album. I would remove Forbidden Love completely. It doesn't feel right on this album, and like I said before, it's hurting Jump. Imagine if we went from Let It Will Be into Jump instead. How High is fine, but lyrically it's a much weaker proposition. It feels like a filler song, but it can stay on the album. Isaac is completely out of place on this disco-inspired record. Sonically, it makes no sense here. I would personally remove it. I'd also remove Push. It's boring on this album and it depreciates the dance energy in the last breath of Confessions. Push is the only song to have a BPM below 100. It does not belong on a dance record. Chop. Once again, dance and pop records usually aim for 120 BPM, so going under 100 is a big no-no for an album like this. I would definitely keep Like It or Not. I find this song lyrically interesting and a good send-off for the album, as though we're exiting the club and we made it home. This isn't to say that Madonna's complete vision for this album is wrong, only that it would benefit from a bit of editing. It's true for most of her records in my opinion, but let me know if you agree in the comments, I'm curious. The physical version of this album is one of my favorite collector's items. Look at that pink hue. I'm not sure if it translates well on camera, but under these lights it is so bright pink, it hurts looking at. Out of all the artists in my collection, Madonna is the artist I own the most vinyl from, but because this video is long enough as it is, I plan to release a second video where we talk about all the records I have in my collection and show them off. So subscribe for that, it should be out next Friday. That allows me basically 2 weeks to research, write, perform, and edit my next mainline video, so hopefully you like the small videos in between too. Also, I don't understand why Confessions on a Dance Floor is not included in Madonna's Essentials album section on Apple Music. I guess boomers are still in charge at Apple Music. Why is there no entry from the 2000s onward? No shade to True Blue, but I feel like Confessions ought to be included here too. Chapter 3. The Visuals. Madonna released a total of 4 music videos for Confessions on a Dance Floor. This is about the average of music videos she released per album throughout her career, so it's on par with her other music projects. And here, Confessions start to show inconsistencies in its visual identity, which is quite surprising considering how coherent the singles are sonically. Perhaps as an ode to the continuous nature of the album, the first 2 music videos are also continuous. Although Hung Up and Sorry are not placed in succession on the album, the music video for Sorry begins where Hung Up ends. And just that alone is interesting because it forces us to look at Hung Up and Sorry as one piece of media instead of 2 separate music videos. That is very much the spirit of Confessions on a Dance Floor. It was created to be played continuously as though we were experiencing it in a nightclub. And similarly, we're meant to watch these 2 videos as a continuous experience. Of the 2, Hung Up is probably the most iconic thanks to this scene featuring Madonna in her pink onesie. Fun fact, Venus Delight, best known for her appearance on RuPaul's Drag Race, is wearing this exact outfit in her episode of My Strange Addiction. So funny. I also remember the music video for Hung Up being praised for Madonna's ability to make a comeback in her late 40s. This was viewed as a true achievement in the Y2K, an era obsessed with youth. Today, it seems funny to discount a 47-year-old pop star, but back in the day, only Cher had achieved this sort of a comeback later in her career. I think many people view Madonna's use of sexuality as her most bold move, but I personally think her most badass statement is to continue asserting her sexuality despite the criticism associated with her age. The sexuality of aging people is taboo in our culture. I'm sure some of you remember how during the Celebration tour, Madonna received criticism for dressing sexy, quote, at that age. Well, believe it or not, this type of criticism was also leveraged at her in 2005 with Hung Up. And I would argue the Confessions era in her career really signaled that Madonna was here to stay, regardless of the unfair criticism regarding her age. Back to the videos. If Hung Up, the song, borrows from ABBA, then the video echoes a similar idea. It's widely understood to be a tribute, or at least hint at the movie Saturday Night Fever. And here again, Madonna signals her appreciation for the disco era and her intent to blend it with Y2K aesthetics, which is what the song achieves sonically. Her hair is so obviously inspired by a 70s blowout, the bottom lash too, but she's still very Y2K. Look at those skinny jeans. It's not like she's wearing bell-bottom jeans. It's a fun video. It blends dancing and parkour and brings an urban aesthetic without distorting Madonna's image. In other words, she's not trying to be urban, rather she exists in that context, if you know what I mean. And most importantly, Madonna is seen having fun. This is an invitation to dance. Madonna is letting us into the club. But after the club, Madonna is not done partying, because in Sorry, her girlfriends pick her up straight from the club to continue their night out on the town. Whereas in Hung Up, we see Madonna transform from her dance rehearsal into a club diva. In Sorry, the vision is fully formed. She is the disco diva. She changes from her Hung Up clothes to fully embrace her Y2K spin on disco, and it works so well. And most importantly, here again, we see Madonna having fun. She wants us to dance. She wants us to join the fun, and with the revolving door of hot men coming in and out of her party bus, she definitely wants us to enjoy the view. And I love this color scheme on Madonna. The soft lilac mixed with the warm pink neon hues, chef's kiss. No wonder the early promo for Confessions 2 plays on this aesthetic a lot. The video is not as dance focused as Hung Up, even if there are dance scenes. Instead, Madonna takes us to the roller rink, once again borrowing visually from the 70s and updating it for the Y2K. I think it's also interesting that lyrically, these two songs are breakup songs, and visually, Madonna gives us the image of an emancipated single woman ready to enjoy life and all the pleasures it has to offer. She's flirting with men throughout these videos and is vibing with her girlfriends. She's really tapping into the moment after a breakup when you're done crying and just want to have fun, get out there and forget about him. It's such a vibe, honestly. Unfortunately, the cohesion we find in the first two music videos is lost for the two following videos from this album cycle. I'm sorry, but Get Together is so cheap looking. Both versions, the so-called European version and the main version, both of them look cheap. It looks like it was made using Apple's photo booth. What a letdown, especially following the genius of Hung Up and Sorry. The video was made using footage from Madonna's performance at the Coco Club in London, but they might as well just release the actual footage. Like, what am I watching? It's a shame because Get Together deserved a good video. I think the low view count on YouTube proves how disappointing the video was. The following video looks better as far as effort goes, but it failed to follow the through line that the album and the first two videos created. The video for Jump borrows from previous concepts introduced in Hung Up, like parkour and the Japanese urban scenery, but those elements were not the through line of this project. Stylistically, Confessions borrowed from the disco era to propel it into the present. The video for Jump fails to build on that proposition. Instead, it looks like it belongs more to Heart Candy than Confessions on a Dance Floor, sort of. When I think of Confessions, I think of a dirty blonde, borderline red-haired Madonna in a disco-inspired outfit, not a bleach blonde, bob-wearing Madonna in leather gear. It looks like it could have been released alongside the music video for Celebration, not Confessions. It feels like Madonna was ready to move to the next project before she was done with Confessions. And that's a shame, really, because Jump would have benefited from a more coherent video aesthetic. Sonically, it belongs on Confessions on the Dance Floor, but visually, we're really lost at this point. Chapter 4: The Live Performances. The Confessions on a Dance Floor era was marked by a ton of great live performances. This includes promotional appearances on television, awards shows, and performances at big events. And Madonna also delivered an acclaimed tour with this album. In November 2005, she premiered Hung Up at the MTV Europe Music Awards. She performed Hung Up and Get Together on The Parkinson Show, and soon after, she sang Hung Up and Get Together on Star Academy. She performed Hung Up, Get Together, I Love New York, Let It Will Be, and Everybody at the Coco Club launch gig. Footage from this event will later be used to make the Get Together music video, as we've seen. She also performed Hung Up and Get Together at Children in Need. In the same month, she performed at London's GAY Club, she performed Hung Up on Wet and Das, and on December 7th, she concluded the club promo run at Studio Coast in Tokyo. I think it's interesting to see how much they pushed Hung Up, obviously, but also Get Together in the early promotional stages for this album. When I first started writing the script for this video, I expected Madonna to have promoted Hung Up and Sorry together, since they feel inseparable in my memory, but the emphasis was definitely on Hung Up and Get Together. As far as I can tell, she did not perform Sorry in November or December of 2005 as part of the early promotional tour. It's quite surprising to me. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. The next year, in February 2006, Madonna performed Hung Up at the Grammy Awards. I think this performance is the most iconic of that era, and perhaps the one people remember the most for its iconic opening stunt with gorillas, followed by her high-energy performance. It's also stylistically coherent with that era, which we love. In April 2006, Madonna performed for the first time at Coachella. This performance was also well received, and it makes it even more meaningful to see Madonna return to Coachella for Confessions 2. It was a full circle moment. Madonna performed 60 dates in North America and Eurasia for her Confessions tour. Her tour was extremely well received. The stage is where Madonna shines. Even when she releases underperforming albums, her tours are universally well received. She is the ultimate performer. Like Madonna or not, trust me, you want to see her live. And in this era, unsurprisingly, she delivered. The Confessions Tour live album might be the best live album she released. The video recording of the tour is also fantastic. It was initially made available for purchase on DVD, but performances have since been uploaded to YouTube, and they are totally worth your time. And side note, I really like that Madonna has a habit of professionally recording her tours. It is priceless for the posterity of her art because her music lives best in concert. Chapter 5: Hard Candy. To best understand the genius of Confessions on a Dance Floor, we must understand what came after. At the top of the video, I mentioned how Confessions was a blessing for the reasons we just enumerated. But it was also a curse because Madonna has not been able to surpass that album since. I know I will get the Madonna mob all riled up in the comment section with my upcoming commentary, but let's be real, if you could only keep one between Confessions on a Dance Floor and Hard Candy, which one would you keep? You would keep Confessions, Madonna would too, and Hard Candy is not even a bad album. But with the release of the first single, we immediately realized how difficult it would be to surpass Confessions, let alone recreate its magic. In my opinion, Hard Candy remains a significant release for Madonna in her career, but not necessarily only for the right reasons. I liked this album a lot at the time, and I still like it. I re-listened to it for this video, and I find it an enjoyable experience. I also have it in my collection. It is one of my favorite collector's items from Madonna. You'll see why when you watch the next video. But aside from how fun of a collectible item the album is, the main reason I think it's a significant release is because with Hard Candy, it's the first time that Madonna is not creating the trend. She's following it. I would even argue that she is a little bit behind the trend here. She's working with Timbaland and Timberlake in the last wave of their major success in pop music. For instance, their collaboration comes 2 years after Nelly Furtado's Loose and Justin Timberlake's Future Sex Love Sounds, which is peak Timbaland in my opinion. 4 Minutes is among the last songs produced by Timbaland to have an impact. It's a good song, I still like it a lot, but we already heard that sound. It was nothing new. Not to say it was bad, just not groundbreaking. With Hard Candy, Madonna stops being a trendsetter. And as we'll see in the next chapter, she hasn't really been able to reclaim that place in pop culture since, with the possible exception of her halftime show. Hard Candy also marks a significant shift in the way Madonna will come to view the release of her albums. Whereas Confessions on a Dance Floor is a solo album, meaning she has no collaborations, Hard Candy's main single is is a collaboration. As much as I like the song and the music video, it's a break from tradition. Admittedly, I much prefer when Madonna gives us a realized vision as a solo artist, at least for the first single. And the reason is simple. If Madonna sings a medley, say at the halftime show, will she perform 4 minutes? Not unless Justin Timberlake joins her on stage. And when you see her live, if she performs 4 minutes, we'll have Justin Timberlake on the big screen. He can't be there at every show of her tour. You see what I mean? Collaborations may boost the album early in its lifetime, but it doesn't pay off in the long run as far as live performances go, where her art shines most. Also, I think Justin outsings her a little bit on 4 minutes, especially in live performances. No shade to Madonna, but most of us will admit that she's the queen of pop, not the queen of vocals. And I mean that as a compliment. It's a total flex that she was able to build such a massive career based on her unique but limited vocal talent. She is really exploiting the full spectrum of pop stardom, and in that sense, it is trailblazing. As far as pacing goes, I think this album is nice to listen to from start to finish. Every song flows well into the next. I don't really skip any songs here. With that being said, I think Hard Candy is the last album Madonna sounds good on. It only goes downhill after this one. The second single from Hard Candy follows a similar pattern of following a trend instead of making it. Give It To Me was produced by Pharrell Williams, and you can hear it. Again, it was a sound we were used to hearing in this era of pop music. Although Madonna puts a spin on a Pharrell song, it's still a Pharrell song. Miles Away was the next single. I like this song a lot, but it still doesn't pull the punch that Madonna achieved with Confessions on a Dance Floor. Still, this is a solid entry in her discography and one of my favorite Madonna releases to date. But visually as well as thematically, Hard Candy simply is not as strong of a project when compared to Confessions. On the cover, she's like a boxer in Candyland, and the vinyl pressing follows that design. Look at how pretty it is. I cannot wait to show you all 3 discs for this album. Unfortunately, this aesthetic is not translated to the music videos that accompanied the album. Like the candy theme or the boxing theme is not explored in any music videos. In fact, there isn't a clear through line with this album the way that Confessions had, at least for its first 2 singles. The music video for 4 minutes is conceptually strong and interesting. Give It To Me is a total letdown in comparison, and Madonna gives us tour footage for Miles Away, so visually it is disappointing. And the music of this album is also a letdown, not as far as the quality of the work, but more so with regards to what the fans wanted. Madonna had just delivered an insanely beloved dance record with Confessions. We wanted dance music from Madonna, and she just refused to give it to us. This is interesting because in the past, she either indulged in what the fans wanted, like Following Music, she released American Life, which feels like an attempt to push the envelope with more synth sounds. Whereas with Ray of Light, she definitely did not give us a follow-up and just moved on. It feels like she treated Confessions like Ray of Light and attempted to move away from it rather quickly. Instead, Hard Candy muddied the water and drove the point that Confessions on the Dance Floor would be a very difficult record to surpass. Chapter 6: The Aftermath of Confessions. As promised at the top of the video, I'm gonna give you my personal opinion on the quality of Madonna's releases after Confessions on a Dance Floor. I'm sorry to all the Madonna apologists out there, but her discography after Confessions gets progressively worse, especially after Hard Candy. This coincides with her move from Warner to Interscope Records. It's not to say that everything she released under Interscope was bad, but let's be real, it all goes down from here. Madonna has not been as culturally relevant since Confessions on a Dance Floor, perhaps with the exception of her Super Bowl halftime show. I think her halftime show ushered in a new era for the Super Bowl. I plan to cover halftime shows in a future video, so I won't linger too long here, but she really slayed that halftime show and raised the bar even though it was definitely not live vocals, let's be real. It's also kind of surprising that she did not perform a single song off of Confessions during the halftime show. But it's also not surprising given how much Madonna tried to escape Confessions on the Dance Floor in the years after its release. I remember seeing her MDNA tour on Les Plaines d'Abraham in Quebec City. It was one of the best shows I've ever seen. She only did Hung Up, but like a short, dark rendition, it was disappointing, I'm not gonna lie. Speaking of MDNA, the album was okay for the time, but it doesn't really hold up today. Like I said, I think this era is best remembered for her Super Bowl performance. It's not as though she's flopping in every aspect of her career after Confessions, but as far as the albums go, her vocals and the overall quality of her production start to deteriorate with MDNA. And it doesn't get better with Rebel Heart. I know fans like to defend this album, and that's fine, but in the mainstream, the release of this album confirmed that Madonna sunk deeper into her flop era. I know she toured successfully during this era and that it was very well received, but the marketing of this album really rubbed people the wrong way.
Clap if you're insulted by Nelson Mandela being...
I mentioned this in my gay icon video, but I really don't like when Madonna gets too preachy. This is an example of Madonna going way overboard with the pretentious marketing and overall message of the album, not to mention the quality of the work. Sonically, it's not on par with her previous work, with few exceptions, and it isn't on par visually either. This era might be best remembered for her brutal fall at the Brits Awards. I remember watching it live.
By the way, side note, as I'm editing this, Madonna has uploaded this video to her YouTube channel, and I always thought it was really cunty.
If we're comparing this album with the subject of this video, you can't argue that Rebel Heart is at the same level as Confessions on the Dance Floor. It just isn't. But Madonna was not done sinking lower into her flop era. Madame X really was the last nail in the coffin. I'm sorry, but this album is hard to love. I'm sure some Madonna fans will defend this album and claim it's genius and that I'm just too dumb to understand how great this album was. Come at me all you want, but come on, Madame X sucks. I never revisit this record for fun, and I can't really imagine anyone choosing this album over any other in her discography. Would you really choose Madame X over Ray of Light? Madame X over Music? Madame X over Confessions? I'd be gagged if you would. On Madame X, Madonna is lyrically uninspired, and sonically, she doesn't have a clear vision. Instead, she seems to emulate a style that is not hers. It's just so bad. And the visuals are meh. I think this is her least appreciated album to date. If you disagree, name one album worse than Madame X. I cannot think of one. If you watched my video on gay icons, you know how much respect I put on Madonna's name with regards to her advocacy for the LGBTQ+ community, especially at a time when it was controversial to do so. Unfortunately, visually, Madonna has not anchored her work in outright queer aesthetics in recent years. There are notable exceptions, of course, such as Girl Gone Wild, featuring dancers in heels, and that one video where we see Monet exchange for one frame, that will never not be funny. She also invited drag queens to her celebration tour. It's not like she's no longer a gay icon, that's not what I'm saying, but she hasn't been as heavily inspired by queer culture in her newer work when compared to her past projects. Most importantly though, many fans have been begging Madonna to go back to dance music since Confessions, but I never imagined she would indulge in dance music again with a literal follow-up to Confessions. Chapter 7. Why return to Confessions now? It took Madonna 2 decades to acknowledge what many fans wanted from her, dance music. But instead of giving us a new era of dance music, Madonna is outright branding it as a follow-up to Confessions. It also coincides with Madonna's departure from Interscope and her return to Warner. I think this is a good move, seeing how poorly received her albums under Interscope were compared to her previous work under Warner. By the way, if you take a look at Apple Music, you'll see how MDNA, Rebel Heart, and Madame X are labeled as being licensed under Warner Records. That's because as part of Madonna's return to Warner, her releases under Interscope were consolidated and brought back under the Warner umbrella, which is an unusual deal to pull off for any artist. So Madonna's return to Warner in time for Confessions 2 is a big deal, not just for future releases, but also because of the unusual consolidation of her catalog after her departure. The physical versions I own are labeled as being licensed under Interscope because they were purchased in that era. I think Confessions 2 is a major gamble. Confessions is so beloved that it's hard to imagine Madonna can recreate the magic, especially after 20 years of disappointing releases. I think it also translates how uninspired her music trajectory is when you consider how much she would reinvent herself up to Confessions and how she failed to successfully do that since Confessions. It is strange to see Madonna embrace a follow-up album when her career was once defined by her ability to create new, unique eras. I'm glad we talked about American Life at the top of the video because Madonna found herself in a similar situation before the release of Confessions 2. At least there are some interesting parallels. Confessions was released after American Life, a record that got mixed feedback from her fans and critics alike. She was highly critical of the Bush administration and the American way of life at a time when the country was divided over wars and the Puritan culture of the right. Similarly, but more drastically, Confessions 2 comes after 2 decades of average to poor releases for Madonna, especially Madame X. Whereas American Life was viewed as her worst release to date before Confessions, similarly, Madame X is viewed as her worst release to date before Confessions 2. And once again, we find ourselves in a cultural hellhole created by the American right, to which Madonna has responded with Madame X, but not to great mainstream appeal. So the parallels between Confessions and Confessions 2, at least contextually, are interesting. I feel like Madonna going back to Confessions is an acknowledgement that she hasn't been as relevant since. There's a reason why she's going back to Confessions on a dance floor and not MDNA. But let me know what you think in the comments. I'm curious to read your opinion. In any case, I'm really excited to talk about Confessions 2 in more details on this channel, so subscribe for that. In the meantime, you might like this video or this video.